The GameMaker program we will be using for coding can be found underneath your Start menu, under All Programs, usually in the GameMaker 8 folder, and GameMaker. As GameMaker opens up, you'll see the following screen. We're going to click all the way at the bottom on the green button that says Continue using the light version. When your screen opens, you should see an option that says Enable Advanced Mode. Advanced Mode allows us more options to choose from in the program. If you see the column like this over here, then you do not need to enable Advanced Mode. If you need to enable Advanced Mode and you accidentally click the box to close the window, it can be re-enabled from your File menu under Advanced Mode. You may have to restart your program, however. You can go over to the tutorial, uncheck Show Tutorial at Startup, and X out or hide the tutorial. When creating a game, there are different parts that we must address in order to start. The very first thing we will need will be sprites, which are the characters or the icons that the program uses. There's also a folder for sounds, backgrounds, which will go behind the rooms, paths and scripts we'll get into later, objects, which are the main components that go into the game and are programmed or coded, and then finally the different rooms that each of the games carry through and have each of the characters in. The first step in our game will be going to the sprite folder and creating the sprites or loading up the different images or icons that will be going into the game. If I right click on the sprite menu and say create sprite, I'm going to name it SPR_wall. It's important you name the sprites the same way every time to keep them organized. As you'll see later on, we'll be naming objects using the same names as some of these files. So for now, let's just make sure we use SPR_wall, and now we have to actually go in and find the sprite that we're going to be using. Depending on which folder it opens up into, you can press your up arrow, which will take you to the next level up, and you can search for the icons you want. In this case, we're going to go into the maze platform, and we're going to scroll down towards the bottom, and we're going to take our wall block. When I click on it, you can see it's a preview. You see the size of it is 232 by 32, that is pixels, and we'll press OK. You can see that it is loaded over here. And if you watch carefully over here, if I press the center button, these XY coordinates represent where the block is going to be placed. So right now, X and Y is 0, 0, which puts the intersection of those 2 points up here in the corner. If I press center, now the coordinates are 16 by 16 over and down, so it's directly in the center. You'll see how this aligns into the grid when we make the rooms in a moment. For right now, let's just return these measurements to 0 by 0, but know that changing the origin point or where those pixels are depends on where this wall is going to go. I press wall, and you see you have one sprite. I'm going to create another sprite. I'm going to name this one SPR_ball. And we'll load it up. When you're loading these sprites, make sure you load the same ones that we're using in this example, so that when we go to troubleshoot it, it'll be easier because we'll know exactly which balls apply to what programming. Bouncing balls, and we'll use the pinball. Open it up, and now we have our second sprite. Press OK. Now for our very simple game, this is actually all we need to create our game at this point. Since we have the pictures of the various sprites and what they're going to be used for, we need to actually turn them into objects. Objects are very important because they are actually what goes inside of the game and are the game pieces and everything that appears inside of the game. Without objects, the game could not be played. Each object is assigned a sprite so that you know what it is. So when we create the object, we will use one of the sprites that we have already created in the sprite folder. I'm going to right click on objects, create objects, and we're going to name this OBJ_wall, And here we're going to select the wall sprite so that the object of the wall uses the wall sprite here. The rest of this is all programming, which we'll get to in a moment. Let's press OK, and now do the same thing and create another object for the ball. OBJ underscore ball. And we'll use the ball sprite to create the second object. Press OK. Now we have our sprites, we have our objects that go into the rooms. Let's actually go ahead and create the room where the game will be played. I'll right click on create room, and we will go to where it says settings, and we always want to name our rooms to keep things even, organized. And we're going to say level 1. Leave the other settings in the room alone, although there are a bunch of other settings that you can change. Let's maximize the window, and this is our game board. Each of the grid boxes you see here represents one grid that is 16 by 16 pixels wide. Now, the sprites that we're going to use are oftentimes, most times, 32 by 32, and therefore will fit perfectly inside of the grid. We need to change the grid to 32 by 32, and as you change it, you'll notice the sizes get larger. Now our grid size is 32 by 32, and you'll see that is important because when we go back to our objects and we put the objects into the game by selecting this menu here, wall, you'll see that the objects drop perfectly in. Just a shortcut, if you hold down the shift key and your mouse button, you can mouse over any of the blocks and it will make one continuous block. Same thing if you right click and hold the right click button down, you don't have to hold shift anymore. It will delete more than one object at a time. So for this particular room, we're just going to continue along and give ourselves a nice perimeter. And to make a point of where these are placed, let's go back and let's look at this sprite we created here. We gave this a origin of 0, 0, which placed the block in the top left-hand corner. That's where the line's in the top left. That's your 0, 0 point. If we change this and center it, now the center of the origin point in the middle of the block is where it will snap to the grid in our room. So if I press OK, and now I come in, you'll see that all of the blocks have moved to the center, which may be what you want in some instances. For our instances, it is not. We want to do this directly in the center of our block. So I'm going to Control Z, or I'm sorry, right click and get rid of all these in the middle because we didn't need them. And let's just go back and reset that sprite to 0, 0. Okay, and the room should go back to normal. With the walls in the room, we now have to put in the ball. Without putting the ball in the room, there will be no game to play. So let's start by putting just 3 balls in the room in those spots. We'll press the check mark in the top left-hand corner, and level 1 will be saved as you see it. Those 2 objects, however, need to be programmed in order to get any type of movement within the game. If I open up on the wall, here's the wall programming. Now, the wall is pretty simple. It does not move. Therefore, we will not program any if-then statements. Your if-then statements will come into the events window and actions. If an event happens, then the action is followed after that. However, for the wall, all we need to do is turn the wall into a solid object. The wall will be solid, which will allow other objects to bounce around off of it. Objects that never move are usually solid objects. Objects that move in the game usually are not checked here as solid. However, since the wall is solid, we will in fact check the box and press OK, saving the program for the wall. The ball is the main game piece. And this game piece, what we want it to do is when the game starts, we want the ball to start moving around the room, bouncing off the walls, and bouncing off itself if 2 of the pinballs end up colliding. To do this, we must first go to our events window, and we're going to add an event. The events we will add is what will happen that will trigger the intended event. So we just said that when the pinball bounces off of the wall, it will move in another direction. So the event, or the cause would be a collision. And when you press on collision, you get your two objects. And it wants to know, what do you want to program it for? What collision? Well, if we look over here, we're programming the pinball. So if we're programming the pinball, we want to know that when the pinball collides with the wall, an action will happen. That action will be a bounce. So we'll pull the bounce, and looking at the programming, it says we want the ball to apply. What does this action apply to? Well, it applies to itself. So if it collides with the wall, self means the pinball will bounce, not precisely, means it'll go whichever way it wants to go, and it says against solid objects, which is correct. We want to bounce this pinball against solid objects. We'll press OK. So in order to get the pinball moving when we first start, there has to be a creation event. Creation event happens when a new room is started and the object is inside of that room. So for example, let's go look at level 1, and you can see that we have 3 pinballs, or 3 instances of these pinballs inside of the room. So we will create a creation event that basically will tell you that as soon as the room starts, it will check to see if a pinball was created. And since room 2 has 3 pinballs, this if statement will be true. So if the creation event happens, the pinballs are there, then what will happen next? We will start the pinball moving in a direction. This way, when the game begins, it will automatically be moving around. Let's click the corners and set the speed to 5. Do not check relative. Otherwise, if you check relative, it will add 5, 5, 5, 5, and keep adding it on every time an instance is created. So let's just leave that unselected for now. Press OK, and let's see what the game looks like. If we go up here to our green button, run the game, it will see saving, and it will also be compiling the game and showing us what we have so far. As you can see, we have our board, the grid lines are gone, and the balls are very slowly moving around the screen. They are touching the solid objects on the wall, and they are bouncing accordingly. So far, so good. The second event we said we wanted to happen with the pinballs is that when they collided with each other, they bounce. So if we open up our pinball programming, how would we go about making another collision event? If a collision we're looking for happens, in this case we want to know if the collision of the pinball collides with the ball itself, what will happen? Well, it will bounce. And it will bounce against itself. Now here it's asking against solid objects. Well, remember that we said items that are moving are never going to be solid. So we don't want to make this solid. We want to turn this to all objects. Once that is selected, press OK, and we should now bounce against the other pinballs. We can now test to see if the pinballs do in fact collide with each other and then bounce off of one another. One tip though is when you're testing to see if certain events work, you may want to change the properties of certain events so that they happen quicker and your testing doesn't take as long. For instance, right now inside of our room we only have 3 pinballs. It may be a while before these pinballs actually collide, so for testing purposes I'm going to put in a couple more pinballs. And I'm also going to go to the pinball and say, when the pinball bounces against objects, we want it to bounce, and then we want us to start moving in any of these directions at a speed of 2 relative to where it's at now. This should increase the pinball speed every time the balls collide with one another by a measure of 2. So whenever the pinballs collide, they will speed up by 2, and that's because I press relative. Let's press OK, and let's then go ahead and run and compile the game. there should be many more pinballs bouncing around, and they should be moving around at a much faster speed if we did it correctly. You can see them bouncing around. And are they speeding up? Looks like it. Now, since that number was 2, it starts slowly, but once it starts moving along, they're going to start moving much faster until we move to the next level or another event occurs. Now that we have the pinballs moving around the room, we want to create an object to this game. In this case, what we want to do is we want to set up the programming so that when you click on one of the pinballs that are moving around the room, they score a point for each one that is clicked. At a certain number of points collected, you will move on to another level that we will create. So we must start off by first adding another event. Instead of a collision event this time for the pinball, we're going to add a mouse. And when we go to the mouse drop-down menu, we're going to say left pressed, and action will happen. So now, whenever the mouse left presses the pinball, the action will happen. And the action we want to happen is to score points, play sounds, and keep going. So if we look through our options here, we can go down to our score tab, and the first option says set score. If you hold the mouse over each of the icons, it'll tell you what it does. This will set our score into the action box, and we want to say set a new score of 1. Now, when you set this new score, you want to also press to make sure that it is relative. Relative means that you're going to set a new score of 1 relative to the score that's already there. So in the beginning, that starts at 0, so 1 relative to 0 is 1. When you click on it a second time to score a second point, you will click and score 1 more point, and it will be added to the score that's already there. So relative simply means you're adding on to the current value, which has already been expressed. Press OK. Once we set the score relative to 1, we want to play a sound so that we know that we have successfully clicked on the ball. First, we're going to have to go to our sound menu, and just like we did with the sprites, we're going to create a sound. We're going to name it SPR underscore click, and we'll load the sound. We'll just say click 1. Okay. Yeah, with the couple different options you have to kind of change it around, we'll just leave it as it is. And then we will go and say sounds, and we're going to add, it's asking for the sound here, so we'll select this drop down box, and any sound that we have loaded over here into the window will go into this drop down menu. Loop is false. If we say true to the loop, it will just keep playing and clicking and clicking and clicking. So we just want it to play once and end. Okay, so following our tree, when the ball is left pressed, you must first set the score, then play the sound of click. Now, the goal is to move to the next room at a certain score. So what we can do is we must put in a gate to check to see if the threshold has been reached. In this case, we're going to say 2. If the score gets to 2, then we want to move on to the next level. So we'll go to our score tab, and now instead of saying set the score, the one next to it is saying test the score, and enter the value you want to test. And what you want to test is the value of 2. We want to know, is the score 2? And the operation says, is it equal to 2, which is what we want. Press OK. Now, the way the code works is this. It works its way down the actions window and waits till the next code block is true before it moves on. So as long as the score is 1, it will keep looping these 2. Not until the score is 2 will it go to this gate and then pass to the next one. Now, if we set this to 4 or 5, now this would keep looping until the score equaled 5, and then you would come down to the code underneath it. But when we test the game, we want to test the game quickly, so we don't want to have to click 5 separate times to get to the next level. Okay, I'll set the score to 2. And now, in order to get myself to the next level, I come down here, say my rooms, and I'm going to say the next room. You can put a transition effect in here, which just shifts as the room goes through, whatever you want. and it says go to the next room. Well, we don't have a next room because we only have one room. What we have to do is we have to create another level. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on my room. You do the same, and we're going to name this room level 2. And I'm just going to name it for right now. Now the way the game works is whatever game is listed at the top of this tree is the room where the game is going to start at. After the game starts and you say go to the next room, whatever room is underneath level 1 in this case, or working down the tree, whatever is the next room in that sequence is what the game will jump to. So hit OK, and now we have to go into level 2 and design level 2. You can design it however you want. I'm just going to make sure, and you should make sure that your grid is 32 so it fits into the walls that we created, and just create some type of room. Doesn't have to be difficult at this point. Like so. I'll press check. And if you get this where it says our instance outside of the room, you can say yes. Get rid of them. There's level 2. There's level 1. And let's play our game. As you can see, the balls are starting to move around. If I click one, I know I'll click it because there will be a click sound. And as you can see, it's a little difficult to click the balls because they're moving so fast. And this is what I was talking about when you're testing. As you're testing, what you may want to do is to go into the ball objects, and when they move in the beginning, take the speed down to nothing. We already know that they bounce when they collide. By setting the speed to nothing, they will not move around, and it's easier for you to click. I'm also going to go ahead and in left press, I'm going to set the score to 3 here because I want to see if the score changes. And if I press a value of 2, and once the score is 2, it's going to automatically jump to the next page. I'm not going to be able to tell whether or not the game actually showed the score, which should come up in the top left-hand corner of the game window that opens up. So let's take a look at that. As you can see, the balls are not moving now, which makes it a lot easier to click on them. And you see I scored a score of 1. Now, when I set to 2, it should still not jump. But when I score 3 points, I should move to my next room. And you'll see there's no characters in here because if you remember, in the room that we created, we just created the outside. We didn't actually do anything to the inside of the room, except for that one ball. So that's why that did not move at that point. So now we have 2 levels and simple coding for 1 ball in our room. This is probably a good point to save our game if you have not done so already. So if it's the first time you've saved your game, you can go up to the file menu and you can save it as clickball. Now, since I already saved my game, I'm going to have to press save as, but it should be the first time you're saving it, so you should be able to press save, and you're just going to enter in clickball. And I would probably place this right up to on my desktop and press save. This will ensure that if no matter what, you can come back to this point if you need to recode. Now that you got down the basics, let's do a little coding on your own in the following design challenge. The following document is also listed in Google Classroom, but you can refer to it here as well. What you're going to do is make the following changes to your clickball game. At the start of the game, you're going to place 5 instances of a silver pinball in level 2 moving at a speed of 5. You will then create a new blue sprite and pinball, an object using the blue pinball sprite from the Bouncing Balls folder. Then place 3 instances of pinballs moving at a speed of 3 in level 2 and code the following. Work your way through each one of the problems and testing it as you go along to make sure you're getting the correct result. Look back at the programming that you've already done, as many of the same features and commands have been done already. If you are able to make it all through all of the following codes, go ahead and see if you can do these advanced commands, which aren't necessarily something we have covered yet, but you should be able to figure out based upon what we've gone over so far. Take your time, make sure you save your work before you start this so that if you have to go back to another copy, you can. Now that we have some basic programming done and our game is functioning at 3 levels, we're going to add a title screen and show how to manipulate and create custom sprites. If we open the drop-down menu next to our rooms, we have the 3 levels that we already created. We do not want, however, the game when we open it to start on this screen. Instead, we want to start on a title screen. So what we'll do is we'll have to make a new room, right-click on the room and say create room, and under settings name it title screen. This will be the screen that will open up when the game is played. We're also going to change our snap to X Y grids to 32 by 32. Now as you're looking at the grid resolution here, each one of these boxes is 32 by 32 pixels. There are 20 pixels going across the top and 15 pixels going down the side. If you multiply those numbers by 32, you get a resolution of our canvas for our game, which is 640 by 480 pixels. That's important as it'll help us to create a nice image using custom backgrounds when we're searching for various images. You can change your backgrounds here using different colors. But what we want to do is we want to add an image for our background. So the foreground image would get loaded here, but we have not yet loaded any backgrounds. To do that, we have to come back into our background folder and say create background. You can name it BKG underscore title screen. Once you create your background, we're going to have to load an image for it. I'm going to get one from the web. So I'm going to open up a Google search image, and when you're going to sort for your images, you can set the filter so we can get a specific size that'll fit the canvas of our screen for our game. So when you go to search, you can go in here under settings and tools. Click on tools so that your toolbar comes up on the bottom. And if we come over here to size, we can search exactly for a specific size. So we're going to type in the width that we want, which is 460 pixels times 480 pixels tall. And if you see on the screen in the bottom left hand corner, they all show up. So that you can very easily see whatever size that is. So now pick an image from the ones that are left. And we can right click on it, and I'm going to save it to my desktop, name it, and now when I go back into GameMaker, I can load that background from my desktop. And see what it looks like. Looks nice and clear. Let's press OK. And now let's apply that background to our screen. So now, when the game opens up, this is what I should see. I'm going to press OK to close this room. And now the other thing you need to remember to do is over here in your room column, if you want the title screen to appear first, it has to be at the highest level under the folder. So let's drag that up right underneath room. So you have title screen. So now when you press compile to play the game, what you should see is your first screen with your castle that fits nicely in place. And there is your screen. Fits nice, not too big, not too small. Now that we know that our title screen is the first screen to open when the game starts, we need a way to get from the title screen to the next level, which is level 1. To do this, we'll do this with another sprite and another object. So let's start by creating another sprite, SPR underscore, we'll just name this start, and we'll load the sprite. Click the up arrow into the buttons tab, and we have a play. And I'll actually change this to play instead of start. Okay. And now that I have that done, let's also go ahead and make an object so that we can place the play button in the room. So obj object play. We'll assign the play object the sprite. And we will next place an event so that when the play button is clicked, we move into the next room. So it'll be a left mouse press. And when the left mouse presses, remember the title screen is at the top level of the room. So if you press left button and you tell it to go to the next room, whatever effect you want. It should send it to title screen 1. So let's give that a play and compile. And what did we forget to do? We forgot to add the button in. Hold on. Once the background image is set, before we start, remember we have to place the object in the actual title screen room, otherwise we will not see it. So let's go to our object that we just placed and let's place it somewhere where we want, where everything may look okay. Play around with it later. And now let's compile and see if it actually works. Okay, so there's my title screen, and I'll press play. And it brings me to the first level of my room. You also, if you may, you want to on the front screen, if you get back here too, is have different options. You could see a high score table or even press another button to end the game. But that's how you create the title screen to start the game. With the title screen complete, we also want to create a end game screen that appears when the game is over. Let's create another room and name it end game. And we'll give it a background of black for now. Changing the coordinates of the axis to 32 and 32. Pressing OK. The other thing we can do, in addition to using sprites with images that are already there, is to create custom sprites. So to create a custom sprite, call it Congrats. And this will appear if the game is beaten on the end game screen. Let's go to Edit Sprite, which will allow us to create a new sprite, and File, New will give us a new canvas. Now 32 by 32 is the size of one block as we defined it inside of the rooms. The more pixels we use, the larger the sprite will be. This is going to be a congratulations message at the end of the game, so we're going to make it fairly wide and tall. So for our width, we'll move all the way up to 300 pixels wide, and we'll use 100 pixels tall. Press OK. That gives you an image that looks like that. From here, if we double click on the image, now we can actually edit the sprite how we like. We can zoom in by pressing our magnifying key here, and zoom out pressing minus. And you have an array of different colors that you can use. The text tool will allow us to type in text. We can then select the font tool and change around however we like. So we're going to keep a bold font, and we want to be higher than 20, so let's pick one that can go higher. Press OK. And now you're going to click where you want the text to start. Now you can move it later, but I'm going to start mine up here in the top left corner. And I'm going to type in congratulations. Now after I type in congratulations, if I press Shift 3 for hashtag and start typing in, that will present a break in the line, and the next text I type will turn up underneath congratulations. Another hashtag. Press OK. And you can see how it's nice and large and fits within the screen. Now, while you have the box around it, you can still edit it with this tool here. You can move it to center it up. You can see it's a little bit big. So what I can do is, while it's still active, I could still go to my font and change the size so that it fits. Once you drop it into place and you get this box out of there and switch off the tool, you won't be able to edit it. I'm also going to click on my alignment tool so it's centered. And I can also change my font color over here by clicking through the various options that I have. Remember, your background is going to be black, so we'll pick something that will show up on a black background like yellow. I'll then press OK, 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 and you see I have my new sprite. And I'm going to make this an object as well. Or actual name, congrats. And by making an object, we'll give ourselves the option of programming it to do something as well, whether it's show a high score table or something else. For now, I'll just leave it as congrats there. And I'm also going to make another sprite. Called Endgame. And load a button for this. We'll say quit. And let's make another. I'll actually keep that the way that it is. Let's make that into an object as well. And what this will do is give us an option to actually end the game. So for our end game object, we want to make an event that says if it is left pressed, the game will end. And the end game sprite is down here, executing the end of the game. For the play object, if we left pressed, we can go to the next room. And this is at the start of the game. Remember, that creates the start. So we will need another sprite that will tell us to restart the game. And for this one, instead of loading a sprite, let's go to Edit, New, and we'll make a sprite about the same size. If you figure if these are 2 boxes across, 2 boxes high, the end button, let's make that, say, 5 boxes wide for our end game sprite. So I'll use a number of, say, 160 or so here. And the height can be about 64. See what that canvas size looks like. And you could play around with this later on. But that's basically the size of our end game or restart. And here you can then try some of your other tools to create various sprites, changing the colors of various parts of it as you go. Some of the sprite options you have to change before. So I could pick a border color here, and that'll show up my border color there. And you can press text inside and say restart game. And as you can see, it's still pretty big. So again, now we'll go back to our font and shrink our font size down until hopefully it gets stuck inside of the button. Press OK. And there's our restart game. You can make this button look like whatever you want. For now, we'll keep it simple. And we'll make that an object as well. And if the restart button is left clicked, we will select our option to restart the game. Alright, let's add the buttons to the end game screen. So the first one I'll press is congratulations. I'll put that somewhere here in the middle. And if you want to erase these, if you put it in the wrong spot, you can right click on it, and when you click and hold it the first time, if you click and hold it, you can kind of align it as you want before you drop it, then let go and it'll stay in place. Then we'll add the restart button that you created. And then the end game. With the restart and the quit in place, we can go back and program them. And you can see how these buttons are just about the same size. You can continuously go back and edit them or create all of your own custom buttons. At this point, we did the programming, so let's run the game. And instead of having to play through the entire game to make sure it works, if we move our end game room and drag it all the way up to the top here, when the game starts, we should start at the end game screen so that we no longer have to go all the way back. Actually, no, let's move the title screen up. So this way, when we push restart, it'll go back to the first room. The restart programming that we did for the restart the game will take us back to the first level. So we have to make sure that we have something before the end game screen. Otherwise, when we clicked restart the game, it would bring us back to the end game screen, but we would never actually see any difference. So let's try this here. And you can see our title screen. We'll press play, which brings us to the next screen, which is our winner screen. And now if I press restart, I should go back to the title screen. And if I say quit, the game should close out. And there we have it.